Hello, welcome back to Have Roots, Will Travel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and yes, I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last several years, I have been telling the stories of les filles du roi and their incredible life journeys, and that really were part of the history of New France and ultimately of our ancestry. So I wanted to share, and I really wanted to honor each one of these amazing women. So with that being said, before we begin, let me tell you how you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. There's subscribe, very important for those algorithms. Am I saying it right? It's the algorithms, yes. And then we have like an episode, and then also the notify. That's if you want to be notified each time I post new content. And the next couple of ways are to help the channel grow. And that is through the YouTube memberships that I helped create with YouTube, where it starts at 99 cents. I think it's a traveler. And then the all the way up to $24.99, the genealogist. Again, the level that you would want to participate has to do with your involvement and your needs, because at the top level, for example, you get extra help from me, and you get 2 hours and that sort of thing. You get all kinds of perks, but each level has its own unique little perks. And so have a look at that and see if that's something that might help you in your research. And then we also have the PayPal button that's on my Have Roots Will Travel website. A lot of people use that. And then something new that I like is the super thanks, because it helps. It's just like a tip, and a lot of you use that as well. And you click on the button, you put in the amount, and I get a notification that someone really liked my video enough to give me a tip on it. So I really like that. It's just fun. So thank you to all of you who have done that so far. And with that being said, let's get started and get to know our filles du roi of this episode. Today's episode 319, takes us to Marguerite Navarre, who is a request from a viewer, and I was very happy to be able to tell this story. It kind of links in with the previous story, and you'll see once we get started how it kind of intertwines, and it's very much in New France. Some stories overlap. So let's get to know Marguerite Navarre and find out what her story is. Marguerite was born in 1644 in La Rochelle, France. Her parents were Jean Navarre and Louise de Berry. Now, La Rochelle is in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region of France, and it is found in the département or county of Charente-Maritime. La Rochelle on France's Atlantic coast was one of the most important port cities in the 17th century. It not only was important as a port city, it also served as a gateway to New France, sending thousands of settlers to New France. And one of La Rochelle's neighborhoods or parishes was Saint Barthélemy. The bell tower that you see on the extreme right of your screen is the last vestige of that church, built in the 12th century, then rebuilt in the 15th. In 1568, the notables of the city converted to Protestantism, with their head, François Bontard, son of the builder of the house of Henry II, raised the population against Catholics. The churches are looted and burned. The city, fearing being attacked in retaliation by the king's troops, destroyed churches, including St. Bartholomew, to reinforce the walls with their stones. The bell tower withstood it all. Each year, on the first Sunday after Easter, called Sunday of Quasimodo, the Church of St. Bartholomew was the place of election of these notables, then presented to the seneschal of the king so that he could become the mayor of La Rochelle. So it was a big deal. St. Bartholomew at the time was a major center. And one of the reasons why the Protestant evolution of this place took place is because Eleanor of Aquitaine, you've all heard of her, she became queen, married Henry II, Henry Plantagenet, in 1152, and he became king of England 2 years later. Thus, they were at La Rochelle, and he basically took it over, and it was under Plantagenet rule until Louis VIII captured it 100 years later, a little less than 100 years later, in the siege of La Rochelle. But during the Plantagenet rule and the control of the city, Henry had the Vauclair Castle built, remains of which are still visible in the Place de Verdun. And so this became, they had a major impact. And from 1568, La Rochelle became a center for the Huguenots. It was in La Rochelle that the Protestant revolutions occurred and created the uprising that would become known as the Siege of La Rochelle. Now, some of you may be familiar with a place called New Rochelle that was made very famous by the Dick Van Dyke Show, but New Rochelle was actually a place back in the 16th and 17th century when Huguenots would establish a town called New Rochelle, La Nouvelle Rochelle. So I think it's important for you to know that those vestiges continue in terms of the history of the Huguenots. Very, very important. Even though we don't believe that Marguerite was a Protestant, she would have had her grandparents certainly would have endured this and would have known about it. So it's definitely part of the whole makeup of understanding the La Rochelle. So Marguerite would come to New France after a marriage contract she had been a party to in France was annulled. So, like many a woman scorned, she thought, okay, this is it, I'm off. And 6 months later, she was bound for New France as a fille du roi. Aboard Le Jean Baptiste on June 30th, 1669 is when she arrived. So the groom that she selected and who selected her, his name, Etienne. He was born about 1640. Guess where? In La Rochelle. But his parish was Notre-Dame de Gagne, which was a Catholic parish as well, located in La Rochelle. And it did play a very important role during the siege of 1628. And we know that it has not withstood the test of time. And so we don't even have anything that would demonstrate what Notre-Dame de Gagne was, but it played a very, very important part in that city's history. So how did Etienne end up in New France? Etienne would come with his parents, Marguerite and Mathieu, his parents. Mathieu was a master mason, and he was, that's a depiction of Etienne, and we would also see his older sister and his young sibling, I believe it's a baby boy that came as well. And so they would arrive sometime around 1647. So they were really early pioneers at Nouvelle-France. So Etienne was building his life. This was his new home. He wouldn't have really remembered much of France. So he became a Mason as well. And in the 1666 census, he is on his own, and he's listed there as a Maison habitant, means he's living there. And in the 1667 census, we have Etienne, who is now 25 years old, and he owns 4 arpents, so about 2.5, 3 acres of land. Pretty good for a young man. Let's see how his life unfolds. So Etienne got into some trouble. Etienne got into a situation where a woman accused him and his brother-in-law, Pierre, of raping her. And remember that Etienne is single, so he, obviously this has been, it's a very traumatic thing. However, if those of you who have watched the previous episode know that this woman who was married accused both Etienne and Pierre, his brother-in-law, of this heinous act. But during this time they did not believe her, and so they basically said, okay, you all committed adultery. So what happened was Etienne had to serve 8 days in prison. He had to pay a fine to the husband of the accused woman, the accuser, and he also had to give money to the hospital. You can imagine his parents were still alive, so there he is. He's like, he's not just coming from France. He literally is part of the Quebec, uh, Quebec, tapestry, if you will, and he is definitely part of that population. So people would have known him. So I can only imagine what it might have done to his reputation. So this is early on in January, February, March of 1669. Let's have a look at what happens next. So he does his time. Again, no judgment, but let's have a look. And so begins I guess you could call it the Reformation, the Réformation of Etienne. He got married to Marguerite Navarre, and I don't know if she knew what had happened, but obviously she married him. August 26, 1669, the man becomes a husband, and so hopefully the rest of his life will be spent in a better place. Let's have a look. They would settle at Charlebourg, which is a historic neighborhood located just outside the center of Quebec City. Was founded in 1659. Charlebourg is one of the oldest towns in Quebec. One of the reasons why it's such an amazing place is the way it was first plotted out, and you can see that it's plotted out in a star-shaped format, or almost like a wheel, and in the middle is that square, and we would call it a trait carré. That is a square. And you can see in the aerial view, even taken in the 1960s, it still retained this format, if you will. And really what it was is a kind of a plan of Jacques Talon to the superintendent at that time of Quebec, of Navarre, France. And he kind of wanted the church to take over and say, like, hey, how about if we have the church in the center and they're all facing the church, kind of like everyone faces a teacher. So I think it was an interesting concept. I believe there's one in Manitoba. And but other than that, we've never seen this kind of a urban planning, if you will, but absolutely an interesting one. And of course, the church, Saint-Charles de Borromée, that is now there, it did not look like that. In fact, looked far more like the artist's depiction from 1696. And so this is a beautiful, beautiful area. You would definitely have wanted to, walk the steps in Charlebourg. If you're there, please, please do yourself a favor and really walk the steps and really see what your ancestors might have seen, because it really has retained much of that charm. Go on to have 6 children. Marie Ursel would marry Joseph Blondeau, but she would die at age 17 without leaving any descendants. Marguerite would marry Jean-Charles Chrétien and would have 9 children, 5 of whom made it to adulthood. Jean-Charles' mother was Marie Meunier, who we profiled in Fille du Roi episode 254, and I put the link for you in the notes. Jean-Baptiste would marry Marie-Anne Hott and would have 4 children, 3 of whom made it to adulthood. He would then marry Agnes Gagne and have 3 children, 2 of whom would make it to adulthood. Françoise would marry Etienne Guilbeault and would have 5 children, all of whom would make it to adulthood. Etienne's mother was Louise Senecal, who we've also profiled, but she is coming up, actually. And I will still put the link, but those of you watching this right now you'll have to wait a few weeks until Louise Senecal's episode airs. And Catherine would marry a man named Jean-Baptiste Chrétien. Could he be? Yes, he was the brother of Jean-Charles. They, of course, share the same mother, and that would be Marie Meunier. And then we have Marie-Madeleine, who would marry Pierre Roy, and they would have 7 children, all of whom would make it to adulthood. Pierre's mother was Fille du Roi Madeleine Rentier, who we've not yet profiled. In the 1681 census, we have Etienne, Mason, Marguerite, his wife, children Marie, Marguerite, Jean, Etienne. They have 1 gun, 4 baitakon, that's 4 goats or 4 horned animals, and then 15 arpamala, about 12 to 13 acres of land. Not too bad. Etienne would pass away at the age approximately of 50 years of age. He and Marguerite had been married 20 years. Time would tell if, we don't know if he rehabilitated his life or not, but we know that he produced a family, he left descendants. Obviously, whatever he did was not good. And we don't even know if anything happened. We just know that that's the accusation, that was that, it's all of that. But she was left a widow. What did she do? Marguerite would go it alone. She would pass away at the age of 82, according to her death record in 1725. She lived 35 years beyond the death of Etienne and never remarried. He must have left her fairly, provided for. She would leave, as of 1729, 72 descendants. A very strong woman indeed. And so ends our tale of Marguerite. I think she was a very brave woman for marrying a man who just 6 months prior had served prison time. Let's think about that, right? And I don't know if she reformed him or if he was unjustly accused, or I don't know the story. But all I know is that Marguerite ended up creating a life and a legacy with a man who had had some issues. But he was also part of a very pioneering family as well. So that's part of that story as well. So I really enjoyed telling the history of Marguerite and getting to know her. So, and we thank her for her bravery, her courage, her commitment. I mean, she survived for a very long time on her own. So no matter what, she was a true embodiment of that survival pioneer instinct. So we are so grateful she came to our shores, and we are ever blessed by her presence. Thank you so much, Marguerite. And I want to say thank you for my patron supporters and subscribers. You are the wind beneath my wings. So thank you so very, very much for all you've done for me in the past and continue to do. I so appreciate you. And with that being said, I'll see you on the next episode of Les Filles du Roi. Until then, au revoir.